Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Mindmeld. Today, I'm talking to Gavin McHale of the Maverick Coaching Academy. He is a fitness business coach who helps strength coaches to build more resilient businesses. So that's something that really resonates with me. And he's also the host of the Six Figure Strength Coach podcast. So Gavin, can you tell me a little bit about how you went from an in-person strength coach to working online to where you're at now? Just give me a little sense of your story.
I will do my best to keep that short. So working in person several years ago had a good solid business growing on referrals, traditional personal training, 1 hour time slots throughout the day. And at that time I kind of realized I don't know if this is going to work out too well for the life that I want to live. I don't know if this is going to really play into me wanting to have this freedom that I have. I had just met my girlfriend, who's now my fiance. I wanted to have freedom to travel and all these things. And I was starting to see that wasn't going to pan out. So over the years, invested in several business coaches, lots of trial, lots of error. Was able to build up sort of a hybrid business. So in-person coaching paired with online coaching. Got to a place where I had what I would call a resilient business. I was making good money and I was able to have that freedom to travel. And then I got to a place where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for a little bit more. I was no longer super excited to learn about, more fitnessy things or things like that. I was getting more into the mindset work that you and I talk about, the business work, the specific marketing work. That's what I was more excited about. So I knew that a shift had to happen. And it kind of hit me I've done something that a lot of strength coaches want to do. I've built a business that allows me to make good money and live, a good life, or my best life, so to speak. So I kind of, in true entrepreneur fashion, threw it out there. And we got some great results early, and then just kind of started building on itself. And I was like, okay, I gotta go all in on this. I gotta jump in on this. And that's where the Maverick Coaching Academy came from. It really was born out of a very pure, I want to help people do what I was able to do over, 6 or 7 years in 90 days.
Mm-hmm. So you're living your best life.
I'm doing my best. Yes.
So when you talk about a resilient business, what does that mean to you?
Great question, because we have just been hit with something that really showed a lot of people if their businesses were resilient or not. Coronavirus, I think, I never like to say that it was an opportunity, because so many people were hit in so many worse ways than me or you. So I will please take that with a grain of salt, but it was an opportunity to really see, I keep saying to people, it shook a lot of people out of the tree that they didn't know they needed to be shaken out of, right? It's what am I doing? How am I making sure that this is beneficial to everyone, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are a personal trainer and you just get busier and busier and busier and busier, you're going to get burnt out. You're not going to provide a great service. So a resilient business to me is a business that not only allows clients to get great results, but also allows the business person or the business owner to live their best life. Because so many times we see in business where the business owner is doing great by societal standards, they're making money, they're working with lots of people, but in reality, they're a complete mess. They're always busy. They're always on their phone. They usually have relationships that are struggling or are broken. And so what I see as a resilient business is pandemic hits, I can still serve my clients, right? Or even in the best of times when I'm serving tons of clients, I have a business model that allows me to travel, to take weekends if I want to take evenings and spend with, your loved ones, whatever it is. That's what I see as being a resilient business.
Okay, so it's a combination. It sounds like it's a combination of being able to withstand a crisis like this, but also one that gives you whatever types of freedom that you're looking for, whether you're the type of person that wants to travel or, any of those other things you just mentioned.
100%. Or maybe if you're just the type of person that wants a lot of money, that's okay too, right? Like, whatever.
So removing that ceiling for yourself.
Totally. Great way to put it.
Yeah.
Great way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've experienced multiple times before, and that's how I ended up where I am now, is wanting to first leaving my last job to move into online coaching, and then moving away from freelance online coaching to the coaching that I'm doing now, where I have a business that I can bring other coaches on. I can really just keep growing and growing. And so that was one of the pieces that I was looking for personally.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. And that's the place where and you and I can both say that it's not easy to get to that place. Like, it's not just like, oh, I want to build a resilient business. And you do. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of preparation. There's a lot of difficulties. But when you can get to that place, when you're like, oh, like, I'm really doing it, it's a very liberating feeling. That's for sure.
Yeah. So that brings me to my next question, which is, you and I also both know that when you're building a business, there's a lot of how-to that goes into it. And so there are a lot of things that you just have to learn, this is how you do this is how you do that. Obviously there's a lot of different ways to do things, but also knowing that your mindset is equally as important as the how-to. So how did you really come to realize that it's not just about knowing what you need to do to succeed in business, but that your mindset is equally important?
Such a good question. So when we first met was through John Romanello's mastermind, and I was in that mastermind for a year, and it was truly what I needed at that point. I needed the strategies and the tools and the tactics to build an online business. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no clue. Beyond that, I moved on to work with another coach named Eric Bach, who you probably also know, who's very, very good coach. Both of them excellent coaches. And what I learned was, like, by the end of those two experiences, I had every tool and tactic and strategy that I could ever need to be successful online. When I look back on it, like, in reality, I really did. No matter how quickly the times are changing, I had the principles I needed to be successful. Yet it still wasn't coming the way that I wanted it to. And it wasn't until I started practicing some gratitude and doing some journaling and working on my mindset a little bit, and then joined a course, a business coaching course, where the focus was on mindset. They didn't sell it that way, but it turned out that way. And in there is where I realized, like, how much mindset work I had to do. And when I started doing that work, so I had success, maybe a good month or maybe a good quarter even, with these other coaches with these tools and tactics, but I always seemed to dip back down. I always seemed to come back to reality, so to speak, because my reality was not a very strong mindset. So when I started to build this mindset muscle, when I started to learn these tools of working on this, the strategies, the tools, the tactics that I had for my business all seemed to fall into place. And all of a sudden, I have this business that I can be incredibly proud of, that I've worked hard to build, but at the same time, like, I worked just as hard in that 6 months or so to build my mindset, right? And regardless of the business, I was working on me, and I was able to become the best version of myself, or a better version of myself. I'm always working to become the best version of myself. And that allowed me to build that, get to that next level of consistent success in my business.
Right. So it's like when you said hitting the dip, and so doing well and then hitting that dip, being able to sustain that higher level, that's really the resilience.
100%. And that can be tied to any part of my life. Like, I had, after all this mindset work, I had these epiphanies about stories I had been telling myself in my fitness, like even in my training, that, like, I remember a story as a young kid that I locked into my brain that I was not a good at conditioning. So anytime conditioning came up in any workout I was doing, I was like, oh, I'm not good at this. Right. So to be able to move past that and say like, no, like that's just a story that I'm telling myself. It allowed me to become better when it came to my fitness. It allowed me to stop telling myself those lies about myself that I had bad conditioning or whatever it was. Right. Or, that this much money per month is just crazy. You can't do that. There's no way that you can make that much money per month. There's no way that you can, run a mile in that time. All these things were just stories I was telling myself. And then it's just when I stopped telling myself those stories or started telling myself the truth, the resiliency just started to build up. And that's when things started to stay at that high level.
Yeah, I think those are perfect examples of limiting beliefs. And we tell ourselves things like that all over the place. Like you said, it could be, I'm not good at conditioning. It could be, I could never make that much money. Things like that. So I would love to talk a little bit more about some stumbling blocks. So now that you're a coach for coaches, now that you're doing business coaching, when you see someone that is spinning their wheels in their business, what are some of the beliefs that they have that are keeping them stuck? And this might be the same for you, because you said that, you had to do a lot of work on your mindset. So it might be the same things. What would you or people that are coming to you really struggle with in terms of their beliefs?
What's interesting is, so most of the people that I work with are kind of like in my demographic, right? They're like in their 30s, they're established in their business. They're not like brand new to strength coaching. They're pretty established in it. And what I find keeps coming up is that we all grew up with parents who were taught, for the most part, let's say 80 to 90%, who were taught to be cogs in a wheel. So yeah, exactly. I was hoping that you'd agree and you wouldn't say, oh, well, my parents were, bucked the trend. But at the end of the day, I grew up with a cop and a teacher for parents, right? And so I remember just, whether it's like consciously pounded into your brain or subconsciously, these things around, and I've done a lot of work with some of my colleagues that I'm learning from lately around, like, how many times did you hear money doesn't grow on trees? How many times did you hear you have to work really, really hard for your money, right? And so these things just subconsciously get put into your brain. And what people don't understand is that, like, these subconscious beliefs are guiding you without you even knowing it. So you could say, I want to make $1 million in your head. You could say that consciously day in and day out. But with what we know about the subconscious brain is 95 to 98% of your brain is subconscious. So if you have these beliefs that money doesn't grow on trees, I have to work really hard for my money, or like making more than $10,000 a month is absolutely crazy. Well, what do you think is going to be guiding your behavior subconsciously, right? You're going to be like, you're going to make 15K one month and then be like, whoa, this is way too much. I can't be doing this. And you're going to be pulled back down. So first of all, I think you have to recognize these beliefs, these self-limiting beliefs. And that comes through, working with coaches. That comes through really sitting down and thinking about these things, right? And then you have to do the work to show yourself that this is not the truth, that this is a lie, or this is a thought that you're telling yourself. I hope that this somewhat answers the question, but the biggest thing that I've found is the belief system, is the mindset and the belief system, and shifting that. Because if you get that, that's the foundation for all the tools, tactics, strategies, all that stuff.
Yeah, and you just answered my next question, which was, if these are things that we don't realize that we have, how do we spot them? And you mentioned, working with a coach. And for me, it's even been, some of the books that I've read that have pointed out, if this is that these are beliefs that a lot of people have, they're holding them back. And I was like, oh yeah, that's mine. Ew.
That's probably me. Yeah. And one of the things that I did, even to start, this was regardless of coaching, was when you have these feelings or when you have these thoughts come up, what most of us do and what causes most issues is most of us just go, nope, I'm not going to deal with that part of my brain. I'm going to put that away and never think about it again. But taking those uncomfortable thoughts or those uncomfortable feelings and just picking the scab, right? Like, well, why do I feel that way? And not looking at it as like a life or death situation, just as like being curious, like, well, why do I think that? Why did I just say that way? Like that, like, oh, way to go, you got great results because you were working so hard. Well, really, was it because I was working so hard, or was it just because I did this one specific thing better? Right? So just like catching ourselves when we're getting into those places and just being ruthlessly curious on like, why is this way? Why am I feeling this way? Is this the truth, or is this a belief or a thought process?
Right. And another thing that I would add to that is when I've been looking at limiting beliefs or having, what I would call a fixed mindset, and that belief that, well, this is just how it is, or this is just how I am, as opposed to, I can learn and grow and get better at anything, is to really look at where you're making an excuse to say, I could never make 15 grand a month, or I could never do this, I could never do that. Or alternatively, where you're saying, when you're looking at going, why can't I do that? So if you're asking, why can't I do that? There's probably some limiting belief that you haven't identified yet.
Yeah, that's it. That's actually an excellent kind of like piece where you can really pull it out, is like, if you are saying, why can't I, keep going, keep digging, because there's something there.
Absolutely. So earlier you mentioned when we were talking about resilience, so creating a resilient business, but also you mentioned being resilient personally. What are some of the unexpected, we'll call them side effects, of working on your mindset that you got outside of business?
Oh man. First of all, I'm just generally a happier person. So when you were speaking on my platform, you talked about gratitude and just doing that work around gratitude and doing that work around learning. There was a lot that I didn't know about myself. So when I learned more about myself, when I became more grateful, I just became happier just in general. So that's number one for me, was just being a happier person. Number two, my relationship has gotten so much better because I can figure out when I'm being, for lack of a better term, an asshole. And I can, and I can catch myself and be like, no, like, that's not me. That's not a value that I possess. Like, let me make that right. And then also just being able to be in a growth mindset when it comes to my relationship, and realize that I'm not perfect, realize that my partner is not perfect, and realize that we both will be working along this road together. It's literally all about a growth mindset. It's like, hey, I messed up and I'm really sorry, and here's what we can learn out of it, or here's how we can get better. The final piece, the really best piece that I think really, it's hard to disconnect this from business, but in doing the things that I've needed to do, in leaning into the hard things, in making sure there's no stone unturned, I have built a deep rooted level of confidence in myself, in what I know I need to do, in what I know I can do, and in how I can help people and show up in this world. You can be confident, but it can be fickle. And I've really truly found that doing this work and constantly doing this work allows me to be able to say, I am doing the things I need to do every single day to become better. Like, I know that I am. And there's that trust in yourself when you know you're doing that. And when you do fall off, to be like, I know I can just pick this right back up. I know, like, I didn't do it for a couple days for whatever reason. I was lazy. I told myself stories, and I can easily pick this back up and I can be right back on track. Whereas so many people are like, how do I get back to this place, or how do I get to this place where times were good? Like, they have no idea how they got there, and they're just completely stuck when things aren't good. I know that when things aren't good, I just have to double down on my mindset work and the things that I suck at, so that I can get back to the place where things are going to start going my way again.
Yeah, there's so much in what you just said that I could touch on. One of them really being the last thing in terms of creating a replicable process for yourself is, rather than going into this going, things are great, but I have no idea why, is I know how to make them, oh God, I don't want to say this. I was going to say make them great again. I know how to get back to that better place.
Let's leave that part out.
The other thing that I really loved was when you were talking about your relationship, is saying, it's just going to get better and better. There's no day that's going to come when we're going to say, look, what we've got is perfect. And that's one of the mindsets that I love, is just the idea of mastery, as opposed to getting to this point where, okay, today I'm going to call myself an expert and then I can stop working. Is whatever you're working on, yourself, your business, your relationship, this sense of, I'm going to get better and better every day. And maybe you'll get to a point where you do consider yourself an expert, but that doesn't mean that you ever stop learning, or that you ever stop failing and growing and working on things. And that sense of mastery where, you can be incredible, but you're never quite done, that there's always a little bit more to do. I don't consider that to be a bad thing. That is actually something that I strive for in every realm of my life.
Yes. I you hear so many times as you're coming up and learning this stuff, like you need to be a lifelong student and all that stuff. But I think what's really connected with me and what you just said was this idea of mastery, because it's hard. Like the word student can be construed in so many different ways, but the idea of mastery, of continuing to strive for mastery, is just like, it's never going to be perfect and it's never going to be done. And the moment that you think it is the moment when you may as well just shut it down. And you're constantly like, mastery truly is like a never ending process. Right. And it just ties back to, what I know you talk about a lot, which is the growth mindset. Is like, you talked about failure, viewing failure in a different way. Failure is the quickest way for me to get to the next level. Mm-hmm. Instead of failure it makes me feel bad, right? Failure is actually what I need to go to the next level of mastery. And then when I'm there, I'm going to need to fail again to get to the next level of mastery. And, every time that speaking of relationships, every time that I do something stupid, right, I learn from it and I become better and I become a better partner. And, she does the same things. She doesn't do the same stupid things as me, but she does other things that she learns from. And I'm sure it's the same for you. Like that's the best part about being on the same page with that. And it's so funny. It's so hard to separate relationship, personal, business, because it really is all cyclical. It all does work together.
Right. All of that stuff is interconnected. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to change gears a little bit and just ask you, what are some of the practices or the rituals that you have in your own life that help to either just support the mindset that you have achieved, or to grow what you have? So what do you do either for maintenance or for growth?
So the number one thing that I do every morning is, one of my mentors calls it's like walking the dog. So I do like a morning mindfulness practice, and that does change sometimes. It always does include gratitude. It always includes reading a passage from the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. It's just something that resets me. And then what I've been doing lately, what I've been having success with lately, is just like pulling out all of my fears that are kind of in my head, or what's maybe I'm feeling afraid about, and putting them on paper, and then thinking and reframing these things into how is that just a belief or a thought? Like, how am I lying to myself? Like, what's the truth here? Because there's some truth in it, but it's probably like that lie or that fear is probably somewhat coming from a belief. So I'll usually get 3 to 5, and sometimes it goes pretty deep and sometimes it goes pretty dark. But then I pull it back with the truth. And then I've been really working lately on my I am statements. So something that I learned was that like the most important words in the English language are the words that come after I am, right? Because if you identify as something, then it's going to be it's going to be very, if you identify as something negative, it's going to be very difficult to come out of that. So I've been working on some I am statements. So that's something that I do every single morning. I walk the dog. I get my animal brain. I just let it kind of do its thing and move forward. And then the other thing I do is, much like we've been talking about, is just catching myself in limiting beliefs or in the way that I'm speaking to myself and leaning in. Not just saying like, oh, that's always the way we've done it, or, oh, that's crazy, or, oh, I could never do that. And just catching myself and being like, why did I just say that? Why do I feel that way? Great example was before coronavirus hit, when I was working out with I have my own coach for fitness, and we were doing a conditioning workout, and I had that epiphany around what I said earlier was like, I have always, since this, I can remember the day when I was like 14 years old, when I ran a beep test and it was horrible. And it turns out the week later that I actually had strep throat. But I told myself a story that day that I was just bad at conditioning. And so every conditioning workout, I was not only fighting like the difficulty of the workout, but I was also fighting my own brain, saying like that I was bad at conditioning, right? But it came from like leaning into that, like, why is this so hard for me? I work so hard in the gym. Like, why is this so hard? Why have I never been able to do this? And it truly came from like, I was just telling myself a story about myself, right? So, you talk about journaling. For me, there's a little bit of journaling there, but a lot of it is just catching myself and just like leaning in. And then, I'll often write things down, or I'll just like even like voice record things where it's just like, what is the story I'm telling myself here that's probably not true? So those are a couple of the things that I do.
Yeah, that's actually, those are really, really interesting, because some of it is things that I've honestly never heard of. And I love the one where, talking about your fears and really asking yourself, fact or feeling, what's going on here. And I think with the last couple ones that you mentioned, really diving in and saying, is this a fact or is this a story that I'm telling myself? So to use your example of being bad at conditioning, if you say the words like, I am bad at conditioning, is that an absolute truth? And even if you can come up with a truth and say, the other guys are better at conditioning than me, you could turn that into something. You could reframe it into, I can get better at this, because that's something that we're going to encounter all the time. We're always making our comparisons with other people. Am I as good as this person? And you can always say, no matter what your starting point is, with whatever you're doing, is like, okay, so this person is making more money than me. This person is stronger than me. And it could even come down to individual talents, but you can always say, but I can get better at this. And telling yourself that you're bad at something is never going to, it's never going to be motivating. B, you're never going to work as hard. And so it's something that can only hold you back.
Yeah. And that's what I realized was, it was like, how long am I going to just let this story play out? Whether it's business, fitness, nutrition, whatever it is, how long am I just going to let this story play out and hold me back? When all I need to say and believe is, I can get better at this. I can change this. There is a way that I can change this.
I think that's one of the major components of the mindset work that I do, is teaching people how much control they have. And that's exactly what you just said is, I can get better at this. Like, what is under my control?
Yeah. And the control piece too, right? Like, one of the first lessons in my course, like one of the first videos that you get when you come into my course, is a responsibility video. And when we talk about the fact that we control everything in our lives, or I have like chosen to put things into place in my life, it is incredibly scary that like I literally, I choose to allow things in my life, but it's also incredibly liberating. Like, it's scary, but it's also like, that also means that you can control it all. if something's going sideways, you can fix it. You're not just like, oh, that's the way the world is. That's the way life is, right? You can control it. You can always come back to, like, you can't, like, there are going to be things you can't control, but there's always things you can control in that situation.
Yeah, I talk about a lot of similar things that way. One of the first ones being, you are the reason that you are wherever you are now, with whatever realm you're talking about. You are the reason that, your body looks the way it does. You are the reason that your business is in the place it is. And that shouldn't be something that's like, well, oh my God, why bother? It should be extremely empowering to say, and if that's the sort of impact that you have, then that's also how you're going to get yourself out. And it's the same thing with any kind of habit or ritual. It's like, you have created you've created all of the habits that you have now. And that means that if you have, even if you have a mountain of bad habits, that you can work on those one by one and completely transform where you are.
Yeah, you can just start picking away at them. Which one? Yeah.
So I wanted to just get a sense of what is the first thing that a struggling entrepreneur, someone would need to learn in order to take things to the next level? Would it be? I know you mentioned responsibility being the first thing that they learn in your course. Would you say it's something different, or?
I would say it's along those lines. So, along with taking responsibility for everything in your life, one of the biggest things that I see so many people afraid to do is to just take messy action. So what I will often say to an entrepreneur or a strength coach who comes into my course, or who even just like I'm just talking to, is like, do something. I once had a hockey coach say to us, like, in practice, just don't do nothing. Just don't stand around and do nothing. And it just stuck with me. It's such a powerful thing, is like, the only way that you won't move forward is by not doing anything. So even if you do an action that is terribly, like, not even close to what you should be doing, at least you'll learn that that's not the action to do. Like, at least you'll learn, like, okay, that didn't work out at all. Recalibrate, right? So for a lot of coaches, like, I'll just say to them, like, you've got to take some action. Like, you've got to put a post out there, or you've got to tell your story, or you've got to, like, ask someone, like, hey, do you want to work with me? Like, hey, I think I could help you. Do you want to work with me? And then all these pieces, like, as long as you look at it with a growth mindset, all of these pieces will fall into place where you're like, okay, that was probably good, but then I went off the rails there, and it probably could fix that part up, right? And so the biggest thing that I'll say, along with responsibility, because I think responsibility is the key that unlocks this, take some form of messy action. Like, just do something and then look at it and go, how did that work? And then break it down from there. If it worked, great, awesome. How can I double down on this and do it very similar next time? If it didn't work, or if there was a place where it went sideways, why did it go sideways, and what do I need to do to change it?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And that really nicely wraps up everything that we've been talking about, which is that, failure it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's really only bad because we make it feel bad. But what I teach is that, you have complete control over whether you feel bad about that or not. And if you look at it as something that is teaching you, whether it's I did the right thing or I did the wrong thing, like you said, you can either double down on what's working, or you come up with a new plan when it's not. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that that's really one of the most important, not just lessons, but ways of thinking that we can adopt.
100%. And it's really hard. It's really hard for those of us. So I came from a background of everything that I did, I was good at. And if I wasn't good at it, I quit real fast. So sports, the sports that I tried, I was always good at, and then became the best. school, it came to me. I was good at it. Whenever I did a job, I got along with people. It was good. And when this business thing happened and things weren't going as well as I wanted it to, it was a very difficult transition. But also it was like that growth mindset and that thought pattern of like, I have control over this and can change it. When that hits, you're like, oh, okay, this is how I can get good at other things too, instead of just quitting at them.
So when you started your business and it sort of came to light, okay, maybe I'm not automatically good at this, what made you stick with that as opposed to quitting?
So the first time that I really tried to grow my online business and it didn't work, I quit. I was like, I'm just going to go back to what works. I'm just going to go back to the in-person world. I'm going to go back to what works, and then we'll, just put that aside. And then the next time when I came to it, and I was building up my business, I came to a fork in the road of like a similar place where things weren't really working, or it was difficult again. And it was like right at that point where like you can just stay where you're at and stay comfortable, or you can push through that barrier. And I was like, okay, I've already done it that way where I just quit. What if I just put my head down and, learned the lessons here, like really like bought into like learning what I'm doing wrong or learning where I need to get better, and just kept riding this wave and knowing that it'll shoot me out on the other side at some point. And it was like more than a month of like real difficult times of like conversations with my fiance around like, what are you doing? How are we going to get money for our house? All of these things. But it was just like, okay, you got to trust me, because I'm trusting myself, and I've got good mentors, and I've got, I know that I'm on the right path. Right. So to answer your question, I did quit. And then it was just a moment of like, I could go one of two ways here. I could quit again, or I could just lean into this and be like, this is going to be hard. There's going to be growing pains, but I know that at some point it's going to shoot me out, and I will have at least learned some lessons, whether or not I've like gotten better, I will have at least learned something.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your insights. Where can people find more about you and what you're doing?
So the most easy place to find more about me is Instagram at Gavin McHale 1. I am also very active on LinkedIn, unlike 90% of the world. So if you are on LinkedIn, you can come check out Gavin McHale on LinkedIn. Those are essentially two of the best places. I'm still working on the website, but those are the best places where we can make some magic happen.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And yeah, I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you.